Welcome to today's episode of the Daily History Podcast, where we take a deep dive into one of the pivotal events of the 20th century, the Suez Crisis, 1956. Join us as we unravel the complexities of this international standoff and its lasting impact on the Middle East. Stay with us as we explore the intricate tapestry of historical context, military action, political maneuvering, and the ultimate reshaping of regional power structures. Thank you for joining us as we delve into the heart of the post-World War II era. Our journey begins in the mid-1940s, against a backdrop where global powers are moving away from the devastations of war and striving to forge new allegiances and enemies. As nations across the globe pick up the pieces, a wave of decolonization sweeps the Middle East. Following the war, imperial powers like Britain and France, weakened and financially drained, find themselves grappling with a surge of independence movements within their colonies. This era marks the emergence of nations emboldened by the prospect of self-rule, nations no longer content to remain under the thumb of European rule. In 1946, Jordan gains its independence, followed by the birth of the State of Israel in 1948, setting off a chain of transformative episodes in the region. As the dust settles from the push for sovereignty, a new kind of tension begins to permeate the global atmosphere, the onset of the Cold War. It's a standoff, not of troops on battlefields, but of ideologies and nuclear arsenals. The Soviet Union and the United States emerge as the superpowers of the age, casting long shadows over the international stage. The Middle East, with its strategic geopolitical position and oil wealth, soon becomes a chessboard for these giants. Countries in the region are now part of a larger game as the US and USSR vie for influence and control during this precarious time. This period is critical, as the shape of the present Middle East is being crafted behind closed doors and in the public eye. The former colonial powers grapple with their waning influence, while the United States and Soviet Union try to win hearts and minds. It is within this context that the stage is set for what will come to be known as the Suez Crisis of 1956, a confrontation that will test the resolve of the old guard and challenge the mettle of the new. For over a century, the Suez Canal has been a vital artery in the body of global trade, creating a maritime shortcut between Europe and Asia. Since its opening in 1869, it has been a symbol of both progress and contention, navigated by ships carrying goods, culture, and influence across the world. Entrenched imperial powers, particularly the British and French empires, had long regarded the canal as an essential asset, a jewel in their colonial crowns that could not be lost or compromised. Such significance also caught the eye of energetic nationalist leaders in Egypt, among them the charismatic Gamal Abdel Nasser. Galvanized by a fervent desire to wrest control from foreign influences and to forge a new identity for Egypt on the world stage, Nasser's vision swelled with the rising tide of nationalism. His leadership sparked an unmistakable wave of pride and ambition among the Egyptian people, a hunger for self-determination and economic autonomy. The dramatic climax of Nasser's nationalist agenda was the audacious act of nationalizing the Suez Canal on July 26, 1956. In a piercing challenge to the colonial status quo, Nasser declared the canal Egyptian, a defiant reclaiming of what he framed as the rightful property of Egypt's people. The repercussions were immediate and severe, rippling across diplomatic channels and stoking the fires of international outrage. Britain and France, the former controlling stakeholders, faced a direct hit to their strategic and commercial interests, thus marking the beginning of a crisis that would reverberate throughout the world and echo down the corridors of history. As night fell on the 24th of October, 1956, a covert meeting codenamed the Sèvres Protocol was stealthily stitched together, laying the groundwork for a dramatic military entanglement that would embroil the Middle East. Hidden away in Sèvres, a suburb of Paris, representatives from Britain, France, and Israel came together out of a shared concern: the growing influence of Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser and his recent nationalization of the Suez Canal. They emerged with a secret agreement, a plan for Israel to invade Egypt, providing a pretext for Britain and France to intervene supposedly to safeguard the vital international waterway and their waning imperial interests. Only days later, on the 29th of October, the wheels of conflict were decisively set in motion. Israel made its move, crossing into the Sinai Peninsula. This initiative was a precursor to the more extensive military actions that were to follow. Unbeknownst to the rest of the world at that time, this incursion was the first act in a well-rehearsed drama directed by the Sevres Protocol. Amidst rising global tension, Israel's role was pivotal yet often overshadowed by its powerful European allies. What ensued was a rapid unfurling of events. British and French forces, exhibiting a mix of eagerness and desperation to reclaim control over the Suez Canal, initiated Operation Musketeer. By the 31st of October, a mere 2 days after Israel had penetrated the Sinai, Britain and France delivered their ultimatum to both Egypt and Israel, demanding a cessation of hostilities and the withdrawal of troops from the Canal Zone. This ultimatum was pretextual, banking on Egypt's predictable rejection. As anticipated, on Egypt's refusal, British and French forces embarked on a series of aerial bombardments, followed swiftly by a paratroop assault, and finally, a seaborne invasion at Port Said. The Anglo-French invasion, a throwback to colonial expeditions of yesteryears, was now in full swing, signaling the underlying imperial impulses at play. The involvement of the Israeli Defense Forces, IDF, executing a multi-pronged advance into Egypt, was a crucial piece in this geopolitical puzzle. Underestimated by many commentators at that time, the IDF's efficiency not only galvanized the tri-nation alliance, but also dealt a significant psychological blow to the Egyptian armed forces. The united response to the Suez Crisis by the United Nations marked a defining moment in the body's history, exposing the fractures among global powers during a tense period of the Cold War. The initial reaction from member states highlighted global political sentiment, leaning heavily on calls for withdrawal and respect for sovereign rights. The United States, strategically distancing itself from colonial ambitions, played a pivotal role in the resolution of the crisis. President Eisenhower's staunch opposition to the tripartite invasion by Britain, France, and Israel was driven by broader geopolitical calculations. The fear of alienating Arab nations and driving them into the arms of the Soviet Union influenced the U.S. to pressure its allies into a retreat. This stance by the U.S. culminated in a remarkable instance where American influence yielded a significant alteration in the crisis's outcome, fostering the perception of the U.S. as a new power broker in the Middle East. Simultaneously, the Soviet Union, under the leadership of Nikita Khrushchev, seized this opportunity to condemn the aggression and positioned itself as a supporter of anti-imperialistic movements and newly independent nations. The USSR issued stern warnings against the continuation of the conflict, threatening repercussions that could expand the crisis beyond regional bounds. It became evident that the crisis had turned into a stage for the U.S. and USSR to navigate and assert their influence without direct confrontation. With rising tensions and the potential escalation into global conflict, the United Nations stepped forward to enact a ceasefire. The Security Council faced a standstill due to vetoes from Britain and France. However, it was the General Assembly that took a unique step. Invoking the Uniting for Peace resolution, it overcame the impasse and passed Resolution 998, calling for an immediate ceasefire and withdrawal of forces. This led to the introduction of the United Nations Emergency Force, UNEF, the first-ever peacekeeping mission authorized to maintain calm and order in the region. The introduction of UN peacekeepers was groundbreaking. The deployment of a non-combatant multinational force provided an essential buffer between the Egyptian and invading forces, facilitating the withdrawal of British, French, and Israeli troops. It set a precedent for future peacekeeping missions and reflected an international community striving for peaceful resolutions, even amidst the ongoing ideological divide of the Cold War era. Thus, the Suez Crisis elicited a complex web of international reactions, marked by Cold War dynamics and the collective pressure applied through the United Nations. This not only led to the cessation of hostilities, but also underscored the changing landscape of global power, where multilateral action through international organizations began charting a new course for resolving conflicts. The Suez Crisis of 1956 marked the end of an era, as it signaled a significant decline in British and French colonial dominance. With the world still reeling from the events of the crisis, Britain and France found themselves facing a reality where their influence on the global stage was no longer what it once was. Previously seen as great powers with widespread colonial empires, the aftermath of the Suez Crisis exposed their vulnerabilities and the limitations of their ability to enforce colonial will. This power vacuum prompted a rapid shift in the political landscape of the Middle East, as the United States and the Soviet Union emerged as the new regional powerhouses. Eager to fill the void left by Britain and France, both superpowers extended their reach into the Middle East, each pushing their respective agendas. The U.S., in the spirit of the Truman Doctrine, sought to contain the spread of communism and gain strategic allies, while the USSR aimed to expand its influence and support anti-imperialist movements. This period laid the groundwork for decades of Cold War competition in the region. Concurrently, the Suez Crisis accelerated the tempo of Arab nationalism, a force that was already gaining momentum across the region. Emboldened by President Gamal Abdel Nasser's defiance against colonial powers, Arab nations began to assert their sovereignty and seek greater control over their destinies. This rise in nationalism catalyzed a series of revolutions and movements that reshaped the political boundaries of the Middle East. It fostered a sense of identity and unity amongst Arab countries, although it also led to a complex web of alliances and conflicts that continue to reverberate in the region to this day. The Suez Crisis hence stands not merely as a historical footnote, but as a watershed moment that reshaped international relations and sowed the seeds for future challenges and transformations within the Middle East. The Suez Crisis, which played out over a few dramatic weeks in 1956, stands as a landmark in the tapestry of Middle Eastern history. It was a moment when the threads of nationalism, imperial ambition, and international politics became entangled in ways that would redefine the region's identity and its place in the world. The crisis signified not only the end of an era, but also marked the emergence of a new geopolitical landscape in the Middle East. As the dust settled after the withdrawal of British, French, and Israeli forces from Egyptian soil, the Middle East witnessed a profound shift in its alliances. Traditional colonial powers, once dominant in the region, were now on the wane, their influence eclipsed. The swift and stark decline of British and French interests echoed loudly, heralding the rise of local players who swiftly moved to fill the vacuum. Countries across the Arab world, galvanized by Egypt's defiance, found a renewed sense of purpose and unity. With the United States and the Soviet Union stepping in to exert influence, the stage was set for a new kind of contest, one played out in the arena of superpower politics against a backdrop of rising Arab consciousness. In the years and decades that followed, the reverberations of the Suez Crisis continued to shape the region's geopolitical contours. But examining its legacy extends beyond just the political shifts. The crisis stoked the flames of Arab nationalism, a force that would lead to profound transformations, ushering in revolutions, wars, and movements that have continued to define the Middle East. Moreover, the Suez Crisis has served as a touchstone, a historic reference point shaping the region's collective memory and nationalism, affecting how states and peoples perceive their past, present, and future. Bringing us to the present, recognizing the parallels between the past and current events in the region is a poignant exercise. Today's Middle Eastern geopolitics are a mosaic of complex and enduring issues, some of which trace back to the Suez Crisis. The fragile balance of power, the role of external nations in regional affairs, the quest for control of vital resources, all these dynamics continue to echo the themes of the Suez era. The crisis thus remains deeply relevant, reminding us how the past still informs the strategies, alliances, and conflicts that we witness in today's Middle East. In reflecting on the Suez Crisis and its enduring legacy, it becomes evident that understanding the pages of history is crucial to making sense of the patterns and politics that continue to emerge. As we examine contemporary events, the lessons of Suez loom large, challenging us to consider how historical forces shape the modern world and influence the unfolding story of the Middle East. As we conclude today's discourse on the Suez Crisis, it is essential to recap the pivotal insights revealed through our journey into the past. This episode has illuminated the complexities of a historic struggle over the Suez Canal, a crossroads of international interests with reverberating effects that echo to this day. The crisis of 1956 stands as a stark reminder of the costs of colonial ambition and the tides of nationalism. The bold move by Egypt's leader, Gamal Abdel Nasser, to nationalize this vital waterway marked a decline in European colonial influence, particularly for Britain and France, while simultaneously paving the way for the escalation of power by the United States and the Soviet Union within the region. In reflecting upon the lessons drawn from the events that unfolded around the Suez Canal, we realize the importance of diplomatic tact over military might. The international response, notably that of the United Nations, set a precedent for conflict resolution during an era fraught with the uncertainties of the Cold War. The ceasefire and the deployment of UN peacekeepers marked a significant step toward establishing order amidst chaos. Fast forwarding to current times, we observe the legacy of the Suez Crisis in the shaping of Middle Eastern geopolitics. The episode serves to remind us that history, when properly understood, provides a lens through which we can evaluate present-day international relationships. It is through the study of such historical milestones that we grasp the intricacies and outcomes of power shifts, the birth of new national movements, and the ongoing impact of decolonization, which continue to inform and shape the geopolitical landscape of the 21st century. By acknowledging and learning from the past, we aim to foster a more nuanced appreciation for the dynamics that define our world today, reinforcing the idea that history is not merely a record of events, but a guidepost for future generations. This is the wisdom that the Suez Crisis imparts, and so we must carry it with us as we navigate the complexities of the modern era. Thank you for tuning in to the Daily History Podcast. We hope you've gained a deeper understanding of the Suez Crisis and its enduring legacy in shaping the modern Middle East. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with fellow history enthusiasts. Don't forget to drop a comment below with your thoughts and suggestions for future episodes. The topic with the most likes has a good chance of being featured, so make your voices heard. Until next time, keep exploring the depths of history and its echoes in today's world.